Hello, and welcome back to UTL's Tech Tour of Utah. Today, we are joined by Mateo from Duuzra. How are you doing today, Mateo?
Doing well, Liz. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for doing this for us.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Tell us a little bit more about, what is Duuzra? What does Duuzra actually do?
Yeah, so I'll definitely get into the technical explanation, but because I get this question so often, let me just tell people what a Duuzra is,
Okay.
or where the name derived from. Um, Duuzra is originally founded out of the UK, and the original founders were cricketers, right? So they're cricket players, and a Duuzra is actually a backhanded bull that has come out. I think it was like sometime in the 1900s, but like equivalent to a curveball in baseball. So like
Okay.
the thought process was we're throwing a curve at the industry at the time of where we were. So Duuzra now, as you talk about like our business and our product, Duuzra is a content delivery and engagement system. So we're a SaaS platform. We do add-in services as well if required, but we have the SaaS platform, so it's software at the core. What you can do is you can upload flat static content into this no-code content management system and put together very easily engageable pieces of content. Think of them maybe as like microsite mini websites, and then add in a bunch of engagement around that. So polling, feedback forms, the ability to ask questions, the ability to track everything that's done in the system. So we're creating a virtual footprint on everything. So we're used a lot for learning. We're also used for sales enablement, marketing, communications as well. And we've recently got into training quite a bit as well. So I guess in that learning. So traditionally, Duuzra coming out of meetings and events, which I didn't touch on yet, but that was the original use case for it. So deploy these applications at events so you could go ahead and engage your audience, allow them to have easy access to content. You don't have to update pitch books or any type of other type of paper medium at an event. So you are effectively creating a better solution for the environment, but also a better solution for event organizers or now sales teams or training teams, because you can, again, upload all that stuff into the content management system, hit a publish button, and it goes out to everyone that has access to that specific Duuzra. So we have a lot of different companies that deploy a lot of different use cases, or Duuzras as we would call them, to engage their audience, whether that is internal team, external team, or whoever you'd like to get your message.
So that sounds really, really interactive. Like the point is to get that engagement back and forth between whatever organization is providing content versus the people that they want consuming the content, right?
100% actionable insight. So when we talk about, yes, like that content engagement, it's not the actual creation of content. We feel that there's people that are better than us software makers out there to come up with logos, mottos, things like that, right? Like mission statements. Of course, we've done our own, but like we're not trying to delve into that. But what we are trying to do is to pull the most engagement that we can, and then create the most actionable insights, especially for leadership. So like, as we all know, everyone loves to digest data, but like in what formats and how you're doing that. And so like collecting data on all these different things and then triggering different types of engagement, it's very interesting to see. Just to give like one quick example that I often like to give is, you will see, let's say we were doing an event, or even like in a sales interaction, like if I'm a sales manager and I'm looking at that, when you're looking and seeing at how people are answering the questions, whether it's a poll or it's a survey or drag and drop ranking, and then you look at how they actually interacted with the different pieces of content. So like what content they were looking at, like what portions of a video they might have watched, or like what portions of a presentation they focus in on, and they're telling you, oh, I'm really interested in this, but you see all this engagement in here. I'm always like, okay, this is some pretty interesting data. Maybe we need to delve into it and have a further conversation on like what they're looking at, or maybe I didn't cover that topic enough, and so it's given me insights to work off of.
Absolutely. So you can actually see where someone might be saying something and actually feeling a very different way, and how you can address that. I find that really interesting, like especially in like the education sphere, knowing what sections different people who are trying to learn something actually have to go back to repetitively. Because I myself am not an audio learner. I can't remember what it's actually called, but I have to have tactile information, right? So I have to write it myself, or I have to do something physical before I can actually learn something quickly. And so that means that, especially like if I'm looking up YouTube, like how do I unscrew my sink so that I can get my wedding ring out of it when I dropped it down there? I keep going back to like certain sections, and having that information might better serve whoever created that content, right?
100%. I mean, and the beauty of this tool also in Duuzra is that it can be deployed in that to where, like, if you had a video thing. So we do some different training with some of our clients, very often with like our pharmaceutical clients, to where they're doing exactly that. So like they're putting the video in there, and then someone's watching it, and then they have to take a quiz, and then it will unlock that next section for you. But then we're also doing like live and interactive training as well. So they'll utilize the software for live training as they're updating, let's say maybe a new drug, and they're bringing in doctors to train them on that, or do an advisory board around that, to where you can get that interaction. And then when they leave, if we recorded that session, we can then post it up, and they can come back and refer to that. And then you can continue to add content into that specific Duuzra if you'd like to, or start with a fresh one.
What I wouldn't do to go back to some of those speakers and informational sessions that I have just loved and eaten up, and then walked out of the room and completely forgotten everything they said.
And I know we haven't deployed this yet, like for UTL, but like think of it from a government perspective as well, like
Yep.
all the different insight you would get, like even in that example of like how they're asking a question, but then like what content they're looking at on a consistent basis. It would be very interesting to see. And we have done some political stuff. I cannot comment on what that has been, but yes, it's pretty interesting.
Well, even so lobbyists are required to do a training every single year before they can renew their lobbyist license. And there's always this one question that we all make fun of, because it's like, if you give a woman elevator eyes in the hallway, is that considered sexual harassment? And it's one of those things where you're like, well, there are so many other aspects of that, but if you don't answer that question correctly, like you have to go back and go back and go back and go back. And it would be interesting to see where places like lobbyist training, people are having to keep retaking and retaking and retaking, or when legislators get trained, like they get trained on sexual harassment and legality and gifts and everything else too. And like, okay, so where are people really struggling with this? Is it the financial stuff, or is it like the, hey, maybe you shouldn't inappropriately touch your intern stuff? Like where are they at, you know? And I think this would be a fantastic like user case for
Maybe you
that.
should take that contribution.
Exactly. Maybe we should think about that for sure. That's awesome. Well, so tell us a little bit about yourself, Mateo. Are you originally from Utah?
I am not, and you know that, Liz, because I don't think it was you that called me out on that panel, but I am a native Californian. Anytime I feel like I panel here in Utah, it gets brought up. I have been here for over 10 years though now, so I often say this is where I've lived the majority of my adult life. Originally from Santa Cruz, from the Bay Area, grew up in the tech mecca, but I wasn't massively in tech at that point. And then previous to here, I was in New York. So I actually was hired by Duuzra to help open up the US branch in New York at that time. And the way I ended up in Utah is pretty interesting. We were actually set to move back to California, to San Francisco, in 2013. My wife and I, she had quit her job, and then I believe it was like 2 or 3 months before we were supposed to move, the CEO at the time came to me and said, "Yeah, so we're not opening up in San Francisco. They've lifted rent moratoriums, and it's very expensive. But we have been talking with these Utah consultants, and you have the opportunity to move there." So my lovely wife Alexis, she went ahead and acquiesced to the move to Utah here, and we thought, all right, well, we'll check it out and see. I'd spent some time snowboarding, getting the better snow than the Sierra cement that I grew up on. And we decided, all right, let's give it a go. And if not, we can always move back to California. Well, 10 years later, house, child later, we love it. We're Utahns, not going anywhere. But that is how I ended up here in Utah.
I do have a question. How do you spell Utahns?
Ooh, gosh, is that the UTAHANS or the NS? Like,
It's the NS.
I
Microsoft
was
Word
like,
started the ANS, and it'll never make sense to any of us.
I mean, you not being from here too, like it's a
Yeah.
tough one, right? Because they really grind you on it if you're native, and I appreciate that, being a native. But like, it was funny because the 2 initial years that I lived here, it was in Park City, and I was told right away when I moved into town, yeah, you have to live here for 10 years before you're a Parkite, and I was
Yeah.
like, wow, okay. I was like, man, just really putting me to the test here, like 10 years. I was like, isn't it more about being active in the community and improving it and making, or the state making it a better place than just like having been tenured here for that long? Uh,
Nope. In
that would be
Utah,
my
it's all
typical
about
look at it.
time.
It's not like I'm going back to Californians that have moved there and have lived there for like longer than I have, or to my parents' block where like their neighbors who moved in after I left out. I'm not like, well, you don't live on this street.
Don't worry. Even though you're a Californian, we will accept you here. We do need, especially our California folk, to make sure that the industry is.
I think that might be a poll though. We'll have to put out there to see
I,
like
I think
when are
so
you
too.
technically a Utah? Like how many years does it take, or is it based off of activity? So like obviously we know each other pretty well. I'm on a few different other boards, and like does that make me a Utah because I sit on a certain amount of boards here in Utah, or like who knows? We'll figure it out. So,
Oh, actually, that's a perfect segue. Talk to us a little bit about the different things that you're engaged in, because I know I was introduced to the Silicon Slopes Hispanic chapter, Latino X chapter, Latinx. I don't know how to pronounce that correctly. Chapters of that group through you. But tell us a little bit more about like your activities here.
yeah. So I chair the Silicon Slopes Latino chapter, which I've been a member of, I think, since 2019, since since it was founded. We really try to bring in the Latino community into tech here in Utah. Get them involved, help them if they want to find jobs within it, help them to figure out what opportunities if they're looking to grow. So really just trying to get that up. There's other things within the Latino community as well that I'm involved with. I'm very passionate about it. My grandfather was a union worker, was Cesar Chavez back in the day, and really good friends. And so it's just I think I kind of grew up with being a bit of an activist at heart. So involved in that. I sit on the board of the Natural History Museum as well. Very passionate about history. Also, that one's a fun one to do. To talk about dinosaur and how we can bring the natural history of Utah to more portions of Utah, how we can get more people in the museum to really see the historical portions of Utah, and not just from like the 1800s, where often people think of like this is the beginning of Utah. No, there's a very robust history of Utah that people should get involved with. And then obviously sitting on the UTL advisory board as well. Love to have a little bit of impact on what's being done from a regulation standpoint, so we can get better results for tech. I mean, Utah is very tech friendly. But obviously, we're always trying to move the needle to make it more tech friendly, and that one's a fun. Outside of that, just doing a ton of outdoor stuff like every other Utah. So getting out there hiking,
I
skiing,
think this
snowboarding, playing some soccer, playing some golf, doing it all.
absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was great.